So I think we can all agree that completing the square is a very long, tedious process in order to solve a quadratic equation. And that is why today we are going to learn a much faster way. It's still not going to be as fast as factoring, but it is way faster and so much user-friendly than completing the square. And it is called the quadratic formula. And I think you've all learned about the quadratic formula in Algebra 1. But we'll talk more when we see each other in person. But the quadratic formula is just this lovely formula where you can just plug and chug and find the values of x without the tediousness of completing the square. So the quadratic formula works if you can write a quadratic this way with everything over to one side, and you call the coefficient of the x squared, you call that a. The coefficient of x, the linear term, is called b, and the constant is c. So if you can get a quadratic where everything is over to one side, then you can solve for x by plugging into this formula. X equals negative b, the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of taking b and squaring it, subtracting 4 times a times c, and putting it all over 2 times a. That's the quadratic formula. That is what you should write up at the top of every single homework assignment involving quadratics, because you're just going to plug into this formula and chug through the math. So let's go ahead and dive into a problem right off the bat. Let's say that we have, let's go ahead and do this one. Let's say we have this problem here that we're trying to solve. 3x squared plus 10 equals 11x. So it is a quadratic, and we can just jump right in and use this formula. But first, we want to make sure we have everything over to one side, and we want to write it in descending order. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move this 11x over here by subtracting it from both sides, and I'm going to write it in descending order, meaning the highest power of x first, and then we step down. This is x squared, this is x to the first, this is x to the 0. So descending order. And now we remember our quadratic formula. There it is. You should always write this down generically. X equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And now we're going to go ahead and use the quadratic formula. So first off, before I use the formula, I want to make sure I identify what a, b, and c are. Now remember, a is the number in front of the squared term. So in this case, it's a 3. b is the number in front of x, which in this case is a negative 11. c, the constant, is positive 10. So now that I have my a, b, and c identified, and now that I have my formula written clearly right there, it's just plug and chug. So, x equals, right here in my formula, I'm going to put b. So it's negative b. Now b is negative 11. So when the negative of b encounters the negative in the formula, it becomes a positive 11. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. Now again, remember b is negative 11. Minus 4 times a, there's a, it's 3, times c, c is 10, all over 2a. Now remember, we're doing this instead of completing the square. So that's the plug part. Now we've got to chug through the math. So let's see here. This is positive 11. When you square a negative, it becomes positive. We've talked about this a lot of times, and some of you are still messing that up. Look at those parentheses. So a negative squared is a positive, 121. 4 times 3, 12. Times 10 is 120, all over 6. Now, follow the order of operations. What is 121 minus 120? Well, it's 1. So this becomes 11 plus or minus square root of 1 all over 6. Well, come on. We know the square root of 1. The square root of 1 is 1. So this becomes 11 plus or minus 1 all over 6. Now we break it up into two different situations. We have either 11 plus 1 over 6, or we have 11 minus 1 over 6. And we just have to clean these up. Working with the equation on the left, I get 12 over 6. Working with the equation on the right, I get 10 over 6. And now those fractions we can simplify, and that's 2 on the left, or 5/3 on the right. Don't write it as a decimal, write it as a fraction. Again, the quadratic formula is faster and nicer than completing the square. But of course, what's the fastest way we have of solving any type of quadratic? If we can, we factor it. And sure enough, had we checked to see, had we just spent 30 seconds trying to factor this does factor. And when we factor it down, we get 3x minus 5 times the quantity of x minus 2, which means x is 5/3 or 2. This was much faster than the formula. But the formula always works. So again, if it were up to me and I was solving a quadratic, the very first thing I'd try is to factor it. And if factoring works, great. I'm going to factor it. I'm going to solve it quickly. If factoring doesn't work in 30 seconds, I'm going to try the quadratic formula. So I hope you took good notes on that. I hope you paused the video and caught up. Let's do another problem. And please, as you're going through, as you're watching the video, take notes, pause the video, and anticipate what I'm going to do next. Let's try this problem here. 3x squared plus 8x equals 3. So write it down. Think about what I'm going to do first. And if I do it, great. If I don't, well, think about why I didn't do what you thought I'd do. First things first, everything to one side. And so when I move this 3 over, we get 3x squared plus 8x minus 3, written from highest power to lowest. The next thing I want to do in this problem is I want to identify my a, b, and c. And so I said that a is 3, that's the number in front of x squared. B is 8, that's the number in front of the x. And c is negative 3, that's the constant. There's my formula. X equals negative b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a. You should always write that down, because that gives you a map to solving the problem. That gives us a plan of attack. And now it's just plug and chug. I'm going to take these numbers here and plug them into this formula. So here we go. This is the outline or the skeleton of that formula. Negative b. Well, I look over here and b is 8. So it's negative 8 plus or minus the square root of b squared. Again, remember, b is 8. Minus 4 times a is 3, times c, which is negative 3, all over 2a. Now would be a good time to pause the video and try to solve this on your own. See if you can clean up this square root and this fraction and all this stuff. Hey, welcome back. I hope you paused the video and you tried it on your own. But let's walk through. I'm going to go ahead and square this 8, and I'm also going to multiply these numbers together. So I got negative 8 plus or minus 8 squared is 64. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. Negative 12 times negative 3 is positive 36 all over 6. You know what 64 plus 36 is. It's 100. You also know what the square root of 100 is. The square root of 100 is just 10. So this becomes, this becomes, I have a little typo here, this becomes negative 8 plus or minus 10 all over 6. And now we can split it up. We can do negative 8 plus 10 all over 6. Or we could do negative 8 minus 10 all over 6. Well, this becomes 2 over 6, which is 1/3. This becomes negative 18 over 6, which is just negative 3. And so those are my answers for x. Let's do one more. And let's take a look at this one here. Again, you might try to factor this, but it turns out it's not going to factor. So we get everything over to one side. This doesn't factor. So we're going to have to either complete the square or use the quadratic formula. Completing the square will be nasty here because it's going to involve fractions and a big old mess. So let's do the quadratic formula. There's the quadratic formula. We identify A as 2, B as 6, C as -3. Now would be a good time to pause the video, plug numbers in, and see how far you can get. Well, hey, welcome back. Hopefully you did that. Again, these are the bones of my quadratic formula. I just need to plug in B. B is 6, so this becomes -6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2A. If you haven't worked further than this, pause the video and work a little further, see what you can do on your own. Okay, hopefully you clean this up to -6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared is 36. -4 times 2 times -3 is positive 24 all over 4. And when you add 36 and 24, you get 60. Now 60 is not a perfect square. So we can still go a little further with this. 60 can be broken down. Now if you can't break it down any further, you just leave it just exactly as it is here. But we can do a jailbreak. So off to the side, I'm going to take that radical 60 and I'm going to do a jailbreak. Maybe I say this is radical 6 times 10. And I can break it down further. I can keep breaking apart these numbers inside that jail. 6 is 2 times 3. 10 is 2 times 5. And now I can look for some twins. And sure enough, I do have some twins. I have a pair of 2s right here. So one of those 2s gets out. The other one doesn't make it. And left behind in my jail is a 3 and a 5, which is 15. So this does go a little further. This becomes -6 plus or minus 2 radical 15 all over 4. Now, it turns out we can go one step further. Remember how we looked at this in the past. We have to distribute this division by 4. Now look at these numbers here. Let me get a highlighter here. Look at this number outside of jail, this number outside of jail, and this number outside of jail. They all share a common factor, and that common factor is 2. How many times does 2 go into -6? Well, it goes in -3 times. How many times does 2 go into 2? Well, 1 time. And how many times does 2 go into 4? 2 times. So we could actually take this answer right here. We can do a jailbreak, and then we can look for those 1s, and it ends up being -3 plus or minus 1 radical 15. I don't need that 1 there, all over 2. And that is my final answer. So in class, what I have for you is I have some practice coming up. And that practice is in Delta Math. And some of your answers will be nice, pretty answers, like x equals 5 or a half. Some of them will be like this. So I want you to do some practice in class. Use your special partner as help. And best of luck to you.